The strange storylines surrounding the Philadelphia 76ers organization continue to spawn up, and this one may very well take the cake. In this video, I'm here to break down why Nick Nurse is being accused of using burner accounts to defend himself and make some interesting comments about both the Toronto Raptors and Philadelphia 76ers organization. Now, I know this is an issue that hits home for quite a few 76ers fans, as we all remember just about 5 years ago when Brian Colangelo was fired from being general manager of the 76ers due to his usage of burner accounts. In this specific situation, Colangelo, and while he never admitted to using these accounts, there was direct evidence that tied at least his wife to the content, and it was specific knowledge that only he would be a part of. He was tweeting out things like medical information, such as Nerlens Noel failing a physical that prevented a trade, as well as some comments about Joel Embiid not being in shape and things like that. All things that should not be tweeted, and that was the reason that Colangelo was fired. Now, these Nurse comments, I won't say were quite to that extreme or anything that was a fireable offense, but still stuff that is interesting nonetheless. Now, before I dive fully into the story, I do want to make sure that you guys are hitting that subscribe button, that at this point in time, 82.5% of you guys watching this video have not subscribed to the channel just yet. The Sixers season is right around the corner. We have the first game on Thursday against the Milwaukee Bucks, so we have some actual basketball to break down and get excited about. I want each and every one of you here every step of the way, so make sure you're hitting that subscribe button, ringing that bell so you're not missing out any content right here on Sixers Digest, and keep the Digest family growing. Now, to get into the story of the day, the Nick Nurse burner situation, I want to begin by before I dive into his specific comments, I do want to say that overall, I am pretty pro burners when it comes to professional athletes, that I have zero issue with these guys having a separate account where they're able to view the lens of social media, not through a professional athlete's kind of window and what they see. That it is nice to kind of step outside things. Obviously, guys are not the most careful with this, and we've seen examples. Kevin Durant is a prime one of people who have been caught on the burner accounts and using things. That is the risk that it carries, but in general, I don't have an issue with guys having these separate accounts. So we know people like myself who are breaking down every move that they make on social media. It's nice for them to have a separate window to kind of do their thing and be a quote-unquote normal human being through things. Now, this is not a specific situation that I would say that applies to in general, but I do say for the record that I don't have an issue with these athletes having these separate burner accounts. Now, to dive into specifically what Nick Nurse said, I want to begin with this tweet here. And tweeting out, the initial tweet is, "It's preseason, but the Raptors had 30 assists tonight on 39 made field goals. They only hit 30-plus assists in 9 games last season, including preseason." Another comment right below says, "Nick Nurse and Fred were the problem." Now, this guy, Mike Leonard, who is the burner account in question, or the account in question making all these pro Nick Nurse comments, replies, "No, they weren't. It was management for not getting a good enough roster." In another Twitter interaction right below this person tweets out, "Even in preseason, it's so sweet to beat Coach Nick Nurse while he freaks out on the sidelines, LOL." And Mike Leonard replied, "A coach that is just trying to win is a problem?" And this guy comes back and says, "Where did I say it's a problem? He's goofy and I enjoy beating him, haha." And Mike Leonard replies, "But yet he is a better coach than you will ever be." So very clearly some bite in these. These aren't ones that I have an issue with. I want to dive into the next ones next. But clear that it is in defense of Nick Nurse directly. That these in question, whoever this account is very much a pro Nick Nurse person. That this is in direct defense of shots at Nick Nurse, and he is replying with this. A little bit more of the same with this example here. So 2 specific questions here. The initial tweet going off saying that Nick Nurse is so shitty for losing this series. He had a huge part to play in that because the 76ers team was not gelled together. Harden came in and changed that whole team, and barely for the better. We should have capitalized big time. This referring to the playoffs in which the Sixers sent the Raptors packing. A very good series for Pascal Siakam, for the record. But then Mike Leonard replies to that tweet and says, "When you have 3 players that are actually good, you can't win much games." Another interaction right below this, Chris Walder tweets out that a reminder that Nick Nurse is no longer the head coach and Fred VanVleet is no longer the starting point guard. That was in response to the quote from Masai Ujiri, who said there will be no selfishness this year. And then Mike Leonard, in replies to both of those, says VanVleet and Nurse weren't the issue. It was a big fault on GTJ, Gary Trent Jr., just so inconsistent. VanVleet made some selfish mistakes here and there, but it wasn't anything that could be overcame. When everyone else is selfish, it messes everything else up. The biggest thing here is these are kind of consistent points with the critiques of Nick Nurse with the Raptors last season. That there was very much a little bit too long of a leash on Fred VanVleet from the Raptors fan perspective, that he was a guy who Nick Nurse very clearly trusted. This is a guy who Nick Nurse pretty much drove into the ground as far as usage and the amount that he put on his plate from a responsibility standpoint, while guys like Gary Trent Jr. didn't quite see the opportunity or advanced, ability to make an impact on the game in the way that fans hope for. So these kind of bite backs are very consistent with what the Nick Nurse opinions were and the opinions that frustrated Raptors fans specifically. Now, shifting a little bit into the Sixers, and where I think this begins to get interesting is these comments here. So the first comment from this guy, which is Green with Envy, he said, "I bet Nick Nurse misses the Raptors roster already." And Mike Leonard replies, "No, he don't." This guy bites back and says, "I would. So much more fun than these Sixers, other than Maxey." And Mike Leonard replies, "Not better, though." And then Green with Envy replies right back, "Actually, they might be better already." And Mike Leonard's right back says, "Preseason, bud. Trust me, I know that this Sixers team is better." So just kind of weird how confident that he is speaking with in this interaction. And in the one below, a little bit back to that same comments below about the vibes and the inability within the organization, the guy tweets out, "The Raptors are anxious to move past last season. The problem, the media day vibes weren't especially encouraging." And then an article linked to on the new look team, which may have not been new enough, and the cloud of uncertainty that hangs over them as they open camp. And Mike Leonard jumps into the mix and replies, "See, Josh, now we know NN wasn't the problem for the vibes." So NN obviously for referring to Nick Nurse there. I do think vibes has become a bit of an overused word when it comes to an organization, but we do know what this is referring to from a personality and an outlook standpoint there. I do think the Sixers and Raptors comments are the most specific there. Just how definitive that reply was of "I know already" was interesting to me. But in reality, there is still not too much to go off here. I do have one more interaction that I do want to pull up here, and I will do that right now. And this coming after the preseason game. So as you can see, the post from the official Sixers account saying 114-106 final. This was when the Sixers played the Celtics. And the first comment underneath, "Fire Nick Nurse." Obviously, very premature for this, but this is something that is not uncommon within the Philadelphia fan base to be seeing these under just about every tweet. That will happen. Nick Nurse should be braced for that. But Mike Leonard came to his defense once again and said, "Is it Nick Nurse's fault that Paul Reed can't score at all?" Now, this is where I might have to draw the line. But before I do that, right below that there is another interaction of Michael Grange, who is a Raptors reporter, and tweeted out, "If the Raptors didn't want things to be different, they wouldn't have fired Nick Nurse. How Darko's world may impact Gary Trent Jr. and Malachi Flynn." And Mike Leonard replies, "Two unfixable players." So once again, an opinion consistent with the Nick Nurse standpoint that frustrated Raptors fans and still biting back with that. The B-Ball Paul thing I do want to specifically address because to me that is where I kind of draw the line is if you're tweeting stuff against Paul Reed, that is a fireable offense in my opinion. And not just Paul Reed specifically. I'm obviously a very pro Paul Reed person. But if there is interactions against Sixers players, that is where it's an issue. That it's one thing to use a burner, one thing to do all these things. It's a different thing if you are critiquing players from somebody that is not yourself. That when you are the head coach, it is your responsibility to directly say things. It is not something that benefits anybody to be going under the radar and flying off these takes. Now, with all this in front of us, with all this evidence, with all these quotes, do I believe that Mike Leonard is Nick Nurse? Probably not. I don't think it is. I don't think Nick Nurse strikes me as the type of guy that wants to get in the mud in the way that some of these professional athletes and coaches does and gets feisty with it. To me, he strikes me as a guy who has his moments where we know he likes his indie music and listen off to, playing the guitar, doing some unique things. He has some escape from basketball in a way that I appreciate and I think is very healthy because this is an industry that can tear you up and really make work your entire world in a way that is damaging to just a personality, a human standpoint, and just your mental, fortitude. It can wear you down. So I don't think Nick Nurse is in the mud fighting like this, and I do think that he would have a little better grammar, a little better, standpoints on a lot of these things. It is interesting. It's fun to talk about, and it definitely cannot be ruled out. There were some comments that were made directly during Sixers games. That's the people that are pointing out that this is not Nick Nurse, said he can't be doing it if it's during the game. There's also the people that very much believe this is Nick Nurse that are pointing out, well, it could have been a scheduled tweet, things like that. All very fair. Basically, you have your opinion. You can find evidence one way or another if this is Nick Nurse, if it is not. Personally, I believe that there's going to have to be much more digging for this to be proven. And the bottom line is that there isn't anything raising that significant of red flags that should be an issue one way or another. If this is Nick Nurse, I do ask that you stop. I do ask that you be a little more low-key about things so this does not become an issue. But I don't really believe that to be the case at this point in time. For now, the Sixers will turn their focus to playing actual basketball, and Nick Nurse will be at the epicenter of this. there are still a ton of questions with the Sixers roster, with James Harden being the most notable storyline hanging over things. But Nick Nurse is very much the biggest reason for optimism that personally I can speak to. I've been very impressed by the changes that he looks to have made within this Sixers roster already, that he does have an advanced tempo to the defense. There's more motion offensive, more movement. The ball is being passed more dribble handoffs with Joel Embiid at the elbow, more just fluid movement from guys off ball, cutting to the basket. These are all things that excite me and could further unlock the Sixers offense in a way that it has not been throughout the Joel Embiid era. That is why Nick Nurse is here. He is not here to battle with people on Twitter through a burner account. I don't believe that to be the case, and it also would be a bold move to be doing this just so early in the tenure. Now, yes, I do believe that there are some hurt feelings from Nick Nurse from the way that Toronto ended. I do think a lot of the points that this Mike Leonard's character made were valid, that when we talk about the, I guess, disconnect between Nick Nurse and the Raptors organization, some of it was that they were not guys brought in consistent with the vision of Nick Nurse. That this image of this positionless, versatile basketball in theory works. But if you don't have the talent to be able to execute these basketball skills, it does not translate to winning basketball in the same way. That yes, it's great that you can have all these 6'7" to 6'9" guys who are able to guard positions 1 through 5, switch on defense, play hard defense, all these things. But if you don't make up for that by having on the offensive end guys that can run an offense or can run these clean sets or are good enough shooters, there are still holes in the team. And I think we saw that with the Raptors last year. I think Nick Nurse was attempting to overcome a talent gap against a number of teams. And that was the ultimate reason why the team, I don't even want to say underperformed, because I could even make the argument that they overachieved based on the way that I believe the roster is. The bottom line is the Nick Nurse and Raptors era is over. It should be regarded as a success that we know he got the championship in his first season there. It is now time for the Nick Nurse and Philadelphia 76ers story to be written. We will see if this is the guy that can take the Sixers to another level. This is the biggest reason for optimism that I have for the Sixers right now, is I'm very intrigued by what Nick Nurse is doing to this franchise, and the early signs have been incredibly promising to me. We ultimately will see how this translates to the regular season, and we only have to wait till Thursday to occur. Until that time, I will be continuing to break down things ahead of time. I'm sure I will have another James Harden update as the situation continues to iron itself out, as well as everything else that goes down with these Sixers. So once again, make sure you're hitting that subscribe button right here on Sixers Digest. Let me know your thoughts on the comment, if this was Nick Nurse on a burner, if this is something that we shouldn't even be paying attention to, or anything else that is on your mind. So once again, make sure to hit a like on this video, subscribe to the channel, drop a comment. I'll be talking with you next time right here on Sixers Digest. Peace.